The Roman Colosseum wasn't just built, it was built from nothing, using methods that still baffle engineers today. How did they start from scratch and end up with the most enduring stadium in history? And what construction secrets kept it standing for nearly 2,000 years? The Roman Colosseum didn't just appear out of nowhere. The Romans had to pick the perfect spot first. And boy, did they have some serious requirements. They chose a location right in the heart of Rome, near the Colle Opio. Talk about prime real estate. Even back then, location was everything. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. This wasn't some fancy flat ground ready for construction. Nope. The area was basically a swamp, a marshy, soggy mess that would make your backyard after heavy rain look like a luxury resort. The Romans looked at this waterlogged disaster and said, "Perfect. Let's build the world's most famous arena right here." Makes sense, right? Well, actually it does. The location was strategic. Close to major roads meant easy access for thousands of people. Like choosing a spot for a burger joint, you want maximum foot traffic. However, the Romans weren't just thinking about convenience, they were thinking big. The ground had to be completely leveled. Imagine trying to build a stadium on a hill that looks like a roller coaster. Not happening. So they brought in teams of workers to flatten everything out. Every bump, every dip, every uneven surface had to go. Meanwhile, the real challenge was those foundations. They dug 12 to 15 meters deep. That's about 4 to 5 stories down into the earth. Basically, they were digging their way to the underworld. Why go so deep? Because they were planning something massive. The engineers had their minds set on a capacity of 50,000 to 80,000 spectators. That's more people than most modern football stadiums hold today. All those bodies, all that weight, all that cheering and stomping, the foundation had to handle it all. Furthermore, they didn't have modern equipment. No bulldozers, no excavators, no fancy machines, just good old-fashioned human power, some basic tools, and a lot of determination. Workers used shovels, pickaxes, and their bare hands to move tons of earth. The drainage issue was huge, too. You can't have a world-class arena that turns into a swimming pool every time it rains, unless you're planning aquatic gladiator battles, which honestly sounds pretty entertaining. The Romans had to figure out how to keep water away from their foundation. On top of that, they created drainage channels and systems that would direct water away from the construction site. Smart planning, really. They thought about problems before they became disasters. The surveying alone took months. Roman engineers walked every inch of the land, measuring, calculating, and double-checking everything. They used basic tools, but their math was spot on. But wait, there's something even more impressive about what they did next. Getting materials for the Colosseum was like the world's most expensive shopping spree, except instead of clothes and gadgets, they needed massive stones and tons of concrete, and everything had to be perfect. The star of the show? Travertine stone. This stuff came from Tivoli, about 20 miles from Rome. 20 miles might not sound like much until you remember trucks hadn't been invented yet. They had carts, oxen, and a whole lot of patience. Each travertine block was hand-carved by skilled workers. Some of these blocks weighed up to 6 tons. 6 tons! That's heavier than 3 elephants doing synchronized swimming. Moving these monsters required serious planning. The quarrying process was wild. Workers used bronze tools and wooden wedges to split the stone. They'd drill holes in the rock, stuff wooden wedges inside, then soak the wedges with water. As the wood expanded, it would crack the stone perfectly. Genius, really. Beyond that, travertine wasn't the only material they needed. For the inner walls and vaults, they used tufa and brick. Tufa is basically volcanic rock that's lighter than travertine, but still strong enough for construction. Think of it as stone's athletic cousin. All the strength, half the weight. Additionally, the bricks were made locally, which was smart. Why transport heavy bricks from far away when you can make them right in Rome? Roman brickmakers worked overtime, cranking out thousands upon thousands of uniform bricks. Then there were the iron clamps. These weren't your typical hardware store clamps. These were massive iron pieces designed to hold enormous stone blocks together. The Romans basically invented ancient construction clamps that were stronger than anything most people use for weekend projects. Concrete was the secret weapon. Roman concrete wasn't like modern concrete. They mixed lime, volcanic sand, and water to create something incredibly strong. The volcanic sand came from around Mount Vesuvius. Yes, the same volcano that later buried Pompeii. back when it was just providing helpful construction materials instead of historic disasters. What's more, transportation was the real nightmare. Moving 6-ton blocks 20 miles without modern vehicles required creativity. They built special carts with massive wheels and reinforced frames. Teams of oxen pulled these loads along specially constructed roads. In addition to land routes, rivers became highways too. Barges carried materials along the Tiber River whenever possible. Water transport was easier on the oxen and faster than bumping along rough roads, though the oxen probably appreciated any excuse to take a break from hauling giant rocks. The Romans also built temporary roads specifically for construction materials. These weren't permanent highways, just functional paths to get materials from point A to point B. Once construction finished, many of these roads disappeared. Quality control was intense. Every stone had to meet strict standards. Cracked blocks got rejected. Improperly cut stones were sent back to the quarry. The Romans didn't mess around with substandard materials, but all this preparation was just the beginning. The real magic happened when they started putting it all together. Roman engineering techniques for the Colosseum were basically ancient magic, except everything was real and way more impressive than any card trick. These guys figured out how to build something that's still standing after 2,000 years. Arches were their superpower, but not just any arches, perfectly calculated arches that could support massive weight. The Romans loved arches so much, they probably would have put them on their chariots if physics allowed it. The arch design distributes weight evenly across the entire structure. Instead of pressure concentrating in one spot and causing cracks, the curved shape spreads the load. Smart physics using ancient technology. Roman engineers used wooden frames called centering to build their arches. Workers would construct a temporary wooden arch, then build the stone arch on top of it. Once the stone arch was complete and stable, they removed the wooden frame, like training wheels for massive stone structures. Furthermore, vaults took arches to the next level. Barrel vaults are basically arches extended in length, creating tunnel-like spaces. Groin vaults happen when two barrel vaults intersect, creating even stronger support structures. Concrete was their secret ingredient. Roman concrete wasn't just mixed and poured randomly. They used different concrete recipes for different parts of the building. The core structures got the strongest mix, while less critical areas used lighter versions. The concrete core construction method was revolutionary. Instead of building everything with solid stone, they created stone outer walls with concrete cores. This approach was faster, cheaper, and actually stronger than solid stone construction, like making a burrito, except the burrito holds up a massive amphitheater. Meanwhile, the hypogeum tunnels were engineering marvels themselves. These underground passages ran beneath the arena floor. 2 levels of tunnels, complete with lifts and trapdoors for moving animals and gladiators. The lift systems were purely mechanical. No electricity, no motors, just pulleys, ropes, and human power. Workers below ground could lift wild animals up through trapdoors in the arena floor. Surprise delivery service, ancient Roman style. The outer walls used iron clamps instead of mortar between stones. This clamp system allowed the walls to flex slightly during earthquakes without collapsing. Roman engineers accidentally invented earthquake-resistant construction. Modular construction was another genius move. They created standard-sized stone blocks and repeated patterns throughout the building. This approach meant workers could become experts at installing specific pieces, speeding up the entire process. Assembly line production, but for massive stone amphitheaters. Precision was everything. Roman engineers measured everything multiple times before cutting stone or pouring concrete. One mistake could weaken the entire structure or cause delays that would anger the emperor, and nobody wanted to explain to Caesar why his favorite project was running behind schedule. But all this technical brilliance meant nothing without the right people to make it happen. Building the Colosseum required an army of workers, and we're talking about an estimated 20,000 people during peak construction. That's more people than live in some entire towns today. The Romans basically created a temporary city of construction workers. The workforce wasn't just one giant group of identical laborers. Different jobs required different skills, and the Romans organized everything like a well-oiled machine. Skilled artisans handled the detailed work that required years of training and experience. For instance, stone carving was an art form. These craftsmen could look at a raw block of travertine and visualize exactly how it needed to be shaped. They used bronze chisels and wooden mallets to create perfectly fitted pieces. Each stone had to fit like a puzzle piece, except the puzzle was 4 stories tall and weighed several tons. Meanwhile, master masons supervised the stone placement. These guys knew angles, measurements, and structural engineering better than most modern construction workers. They could spot a problem before it became a disaster. The regular laborers did the heavy lifting. Literally. Moving 6-ton blocks required teams of workers using ropes, pulleys, and sheer muscle power. They developed techniques for moving massive objects that required incredible coordination, like choreographing a dance routine, except the dancers were carrying stones that could flatten a chariot. At the same time, slaves provided much of the basic labor. Roman society depended on slave labor, and major construction projects like the Colosseum used thousands of enslaved workers. They mixed concrete, carried materials, and performed dangerous tasks that free workers avoided. In contrast, soldiers helped with organization and security. Military engineers brought discipline and structural knowledge to the project. They understood logistics, supply chains, and how to coordinate large groups of people efficiently. Lifting heavy stones required special techniques and equipment. Workers used wooden cranes powered by treadmills. Yes, treadmills. But instead of people running for exercise, they walked inside giant wheels that powered lifting mechanisms. Safety wasn't exactly a priority by modern standards. Workers died regularly from falls, crushing injuries, and exhaustion. The Romans didn't have hard hats, safety meetings, or workers' compensation. You showed up, did the job, and hoped nothing fell on your head. Supervisors and engineers coordinated material supply and labor allocation. They had to ensure the right materials arrived at the right time while keeping 20,000 workers busy and productive. Like managing the world's most complicated kitchen, except instead of food, they were serving up massive stones. Communication across the construction site required runners and signals. With 20,000 workers spread across a massive site, getting information from supervisors to work crews took time and planning. The Romans also had to feed and house many of these workers. Temporary camps, food supplies, medical care. Building the Colosseum required supporting a small city of construction workers. Construction took approximately 8 to 10 years. That's incredibly fast for a project of this size using ancient technology. Modern stadiums with power tools and machines often take nearly as long. But all this workforce was building towards something specific, the actual arena and seating that would make the Colosseum legendary. The arena and seating layout of the Colosseum was like designing the world's most sophisticated entertainment venue, except the entertainment involved gladiators and wild animals. The Romans had to think about everything from crowd flow to underground surprise attacks. The arena floor started as wooden planks covered with sand. Sand wasn't just for decoration. It soaked up gladiator blood like the world's most morbid sponge. Pretty practical if you think about it. The sand also provided better footing for fighters and animals. Nevertheless, the real magic happened underneath. The hypogeum was a 2-level underground maze of tunnels, chambers, and mechanical systems. This wasn't just storage space. It was a complete backstage area for the world's deadliest theater. More importantly, underground lifts could raise wild animals, gladiators, and stage props through trapdoors in the arena floor. Like an ancient elevator system, except instead of going to different floors, lions got delivered to angry crowds. The Romans invented the ultimate surprise entrance system. Trapdoors were positioned strategically throughout the arena floor. During events, these could open and close to create dramatic entrances, quick exits, or sudden obstacles. The Romans basically turned the arena into a giant special effects stage. Seating arrangement followed strict social rules. The emperor and senators got the best spots closest to the action. Kind of like modern VIP sections, except with more togas and fewer overpriced nachos. The upper classes sat in marble seats with cushions and back support. On the other hand, the general public got the higher, farther seats with basic stone benches. Social class determined everything. Your income decided how close you sat to the gladiator action. The Romans invented stadium social stratification. Furthermore, corridors and staircases were engineering masterpieces designed for crowd management. 50,000 people need to enter and exit efficiently without creating dangerous crushes or stampedes. The Romans figured out crowd flow 2,000 years before modern fire safety codes. 80 entrances provided multiple access points around the entire structure. That's more doors than most shopping centers have today. each entrance connected to specific seating sections, preventing confusion and overcrowding. The vomitoria weren't what you might think from the name. These were the passages that allowed crowds to spill out quickly from the seating areas. Roman engineering term, not a reference to anyone losing their lunch during particularly brutal gladiator matches. Seating construction used different materials based on social class. Lower tiers for wealthy Romans featured marble seats, decorative columns, and comfortable amenities. Upper tiers used basic stone and concrete. Functional, but not luxurious. The concrete foundation supporting all this seating had to handle enormous weight. Weather protection came from the velarium, a massive retractable canvas system. This covered roughly 1/3 of the arena during hot days or light rain, like a giant umbrella operated by teams of sailors who knew about ropes and rigging. But the impressive construction was just the beginning. The finishing touches would transform this functional structure into something truly spectacular. The finishing touches on the Colosseum transformed a functional stone structure into the most spectacular entertainment venue in the ancient world. This was where Roman craftsmanship really showed off. Marble seats were installed section by section for the wealthy spectators. Not just any marble, imported marble that cost more than most people's entire houses. Different types of marble from various parts of the empire created colorful patterns and showed off Roman wealth. Each marble seat was individually carved and fitted. Stonemasons created armrests, back supports, and even cup holders carved directly into the stone. The Romans invented luxury stadium seating 2,000 years before modern sports venues figured it out. Equally impressive, statues filled the facade and corridors with incredible detail. These weren't simple decorations. They were masterpieces created by the best sculptors in the empire. Some statues were so lifelike, visitors probably tried to ask them for directions. In the same way, the decorative columns were architectural art pieces, carved capitals, fluted surfaces, and proportional designs that followed mathematical principles. Roman architects used these columns both for structural support and visual impact. The velarium was probably the most impressive finishing touch. This massive retractable canvas system required teams of experienced sailors to operate. The Romans basically hired the Navy to manage their stadium roof. Operating the velarium required incredible skill and timing. Teams of sailors had to coordinate their movements perfectly to prevent tangling or tearing the massive canvas sections. One mistake could turn the roof system into the world's largest, most expensive tent disaster. Beyond the roof system, drainage systems throughout the complex prevented water damage during Rome's rainy season. Underground channels, surface slopes, and waterproof barriers kept water away from critical structural elements and spectator areas. What's remarkable is that the drainage wasn't just functional, it was engineered art. Decorative gutters, carved waterspouts, and elegant channel covers made even the plumbing look impressive. The Romans made their water pipes prettier than most people's dining rooms. Concrete waterproofing used special additives and techniques that kept underground areas dry. Roman engineers applied multiple layers of waterproof concrete to walls and floors, creating barriers that still work today. Underground lighting required oil lamps and torch systems throughout the hypogeum tunnels. Workers and gladiators needed to navigate safely in the underground areas, so the Romans installed permanent lighting throughout the maze. Ventilation systems brought fresh air into underground areas and helped remove smoke from torches and oil lamps. The Romans figured out air conditioning systems using nothing but physics and clever engineering. Final inspections covered every detail of the massive structure. Roman engineers checked structural stability, tested mechanical systems, and verified that every finishing element met imperial standards. They basically gave the Colosseum the ancient equivalent of a building inspection. Except failing meant disappointing Caesar. But all this preparation was leading to one ultimate test: the opening events that would prove whether this massive construction project actually worked. The opening events of the Colosseum were like the ancient world's most extreme grand opening celebration. Except instead of ribbon cutting and free samples, there were gladiators, wild animals, and shows that reportedly lasted 100 days straight. 100 days of non-stop entertainment. That's over 3 months of gladiatorial combat, animal hunts, and spectacular shows designed to prove that Rome had built something truly incredible. The first gladiatorial combats tested everything at once: The arena floor, the underground lift systems, the crowd capacity, and the structural integrity all got their first real workout. Talk about a stress test. Thousands of people cheering while armed fighters battled below. Wild animal hunts showcased the mechanical systems in the hypogeum. Lions, tigers, bears, and exotic animals from across the empire appeared through trapdoors and coordinated spectacles. The lift operators had to time everything perfectly to create dramatic entrances. Imagine being responsible for surprising 80,000 Romans with a hungry lion that just got launched through a hole in the ground. The animals probably had some serious questions about Roman engineering priorities. Even more ambitious, naval mock battles were the ultimate test of versatility. The Romans flooded the arena floor to stage actual ship battles with real vessels, weapons, and crews. This required completely different infrastructure and engineering solutions. Surprisingly, flooding the arena meant the drainage systems had to work in reverse. Instead of keeping water out, they had to bring massive amounts of water in, then remove it quickly when the naval battles ended. Roman plumbing that could switch between keeping things dry and creating temporary lakes. Mechanical failures during the opening events could have been disasters. Broken lifts meant animals or gladiators stuck underground. Jammed trapdoors could ruin dramatic entrances. The Romans basically launched a massive mechanical theater with no opportunity for dress rehearsals. Crowd handling proved the engineering solutions worked. 80,000 people entering, moving around, and exiting the structure without major disasters demonstrated that the corridor systems, staircases, and entrance designs actually functioned as planned. The velarium got its first major test too. Roman sailors operated the massive canvas system to provide shade during hot days and protection during light rain, managing a giant retractable roof with nothing but rope and human power while 80,000 people watched. Structural integrity held up under the dynamic loads of massive crowds cheering, stomping, and moving around during exciting moments. The concrete, stone, and iron construction absorbed all that energy without cracking or shifting. The 100-day celebration proved that Roman engineering could create something that worked as intended. The Colosseum passed its ultimate test, entertaining 80,000 bloodthirsty Romans for over 3 months without falling down, flooding, or catching fire. The success of these opening events established the Colosseum as the premier entertainment venue of the ancient world, setting the stage for centuries of spectacular shows that would define Roman culture.